Welcome everyone to this edition of Seeing Jazz. We had a break over the summer. Um, I'm Hrayr Attarian. I'm a member of the Jazz Journalists Association, and I'm an amateur photographer myself. Today, we are speaking with the Chicago-based photographer, Marc Monaghan, who is a documentary photographer as well as jazz, particularly in the Hyde Park and area of Chicago. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you. Well,
Um, can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into photography, and particularly how you got into photographing jazz and the atmosphere around it in your neighborhood?
yeah. Well, I got into photography when I was a kid, when my grandfather gave me a Brownie Starmatic camera, and I found it fascinating. And I started using little spotting scopes, which are used for hunting, to do as a telephoto lens to take pictures of things. And then I did something strange for a 9-year-old. I would walk a lot in the woods of California in the foothills. So I would lie under a tree and I would take pictures, 2, 3 rolls, just looking up at the tree. And then I would get them developed and I put them all over the wall. And to me, what I was trying to capture, at least in retrospect, was the feeling of the moment of being there, and it involved this massive stuff. Then I just sort of became a normal kid growing up kind of person doing scrapbooks and went into various careers. One thing you'll gather about me is I've had somewhat restless life, which I think has been a great life, but it has been restless. And I've moved between many different things. Um, I was an academic geologist. I worked overseas a lot. I found that the academic life wasn't one I really cared for. It was not close to the ground, so to speak. It didn't feel gritty. It didn't give me, I was working in an institution where my fellow geologists wore pinstripe suits and talked about grants all the time. And I was going, nah, this didn't resonate for me. And when in fact I was working in many of the places I worked with, I was more fascinated by the cultures I was working in
Mhm.
than the actual work I was supposed to do. So fast forward, I went through another career change, became a middle school educator, did that for 15 years. Then I said, this photography thing is back of my mind. So I went to Columbia College, a technical art school in Chicago, and I took 11 courses in photography and photojournalism. And one of them was by John White. Remember that name because there's a relevant photo later. Uh, who was a Sun-Times photographer, African-American guy, and he was a Pulitzer winner. And so I took 3 journalism classes from me, and he said, hey, you have to get something published. He meant like in a church newsletter. I presumed he meant in a newspaper. So I went around and I went to the local little journal, the Hyde Park Herald, and I said, hey, I need to do this. They said, here's an assignment. I said, okay, do it on the front page. Cool, whatever. It was fun. I was not knowing anything. Then I started working a lot for the local Hyde Park
Do
Herald.
you have that first photo that you published?
And what's in paper someplace. I don't
Oh, you
have it.
don't have a copy to show. Okay.
No. And from there, I started just photographing all sorts of things, and I was given assignments, which was a key to how I became uh, a, a sort of jazz photographer. I don't even call myself a jazz photographer, which is I would be assigned things, and I would go and do the assignments, and that eventually involved me getting involved with a group of people because I had photographed the Hyde Park Jazz Society and their efforts, their local um, performances in hotel restaurants and things like that. Um, and they knew me. I started to go, Jim Wagner is a name you might know, or maybe it'll come up again, and his wife, Al Marie, and a variety of other people. And they were putting together this effort to put on a jazz festival to bring jazz back to Hyde Park. It was a dream of Jim Wagner's. And so I started photographing that for the newspaper. And then the university got involved, at which point a woman named Irene Scher, who was one of the sort of big pushers for it, along with Judith Stein and others, asked me to provide photographs on a contract basis for the jazz festival. And that's how it started for me.
Okay.
And to me, this thing that you're seeing on the screen right now, don't take any, I don't know if I can drag it around, is just
Yeah,
another,
if you can you share that
yeah,
again?
is you aren't seeing it, I'm seeing it on my screen.
No, no, we're seeing you instead.
Huh.
I'm seeing the chart.
Yeah, I see the chart too.
Oh, you do? Okay.
So I
Okay.
okay. And what this is for me is an assignment list. It's a shot list. And it's I don't when I do my photography, I don't determine which for the Hyde Park Jazz Festival what I'm going to photograph. It's assigned to me. Now this list, you can see all the overlapping things. Those were all on the wish list for Kate Dumbleton. And so I have to get between all these things, and as you can see, there many are overlapping. So the second thing that comes through assignment work, and I'll get into that in a minute, is that you are got to go to all these different venues. You got to set up. You got to find out how to do a shots. You maybe have 5 minutes, 15 minutes. You got to do the performers, the performances, the audience, the reactions, and then you have to get to the next place. So I've become, well, let me put it this way. This has determined how I have become a jazz photographer. I've observed other photographers who have a bit more time, and envious of that, because they can absorb it. They can listen to the music. I can barely listen to the music. Because I'm focused on getting the principals on stage and other things like that. And you have to deal with stages such as they are, which, as all of you know, are cluttered spaces. And the clutter is part of what's in the frame of the camera. So that's what happened. So the other part that has happened through the Jazz Festival is that this is during the first Jazz Festival is I'm supposed to Hyde Park Jazz Festival get the audience reactions. I'm supposed to capture the environment, not just the performers. And so in interesting and strange spaces, this takes on a different life of its own. How do I do this? This is Jimmy Ellis, Southside saxophone player who became somewhat famous through, he's been in a documentary, the little operetta has been written about him called Back Alley Jazz. And I can't really tell who that's at the keyboard right now. But this is during the first festival. It was a small thing. There's a Hyde Park Art Center. And the assignment was get the performers in contact.
Sorry to interrupt you. Howard has a question.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give the background on a couple of the things you mentioned, Mark.
Sure.
Kate Hamilton is the executive, or she's the artistic director of the Hyde Park Jazz Festival. This is for people who don't know us and for, who may be coming to the video later.
Okay.
Al Marie Wagner and Judith Stein that you mentioned are part of the Hyde Park Jazz
Society.
Founders,
Society,
they're
and
the founders.
the founders, yes, with the Hyde Park Jazz Festival is a multi-stage 2-day festival in late September. annual for, I don't know how long, is it 10 years?
18 years was this last was 18 years.
Okay. And so when you get assignments from the artistic director, she wants you to shoot these various shows, and that's what the overlap that you're talking about is, right?
Right. Yeah, it's the various shows, and lest you think that those shows were ordered in some kind of ranking how much she liked them, they were not. They my photography is used basically as part of the effort to support the Hyde Park Jazz Festival. It's a free festival. People they are asked for donations, but so my photographs go into publicity for publicity purposes, but they also, perhaps more importantly, are used in grant proposals. And so that I'm speaking to a different audience through my jazz photography than a lot of jazz photographers do what they speak. Now, I have to do some of the stuff that all jazz photographers look for, but you know, and I have the opportunity in these particular situations to be the staff, so to speak, photographer. So that gives me a little bit of gravitas around moving around the performers. And as you know, other than your camera and your capabilities with the camera, the most important thing for a jazz photographer is access. And access can make or break an entire set of images. So if you're stuck in the front row taking pictures, unable to stand, you can't get to the side, or you don't have that, you're stuck with a certain kind of image that you're going to be getting.
I just wanted to add one more thing, Mark, about the nature of the festival so that people have an understanding of the context of what you're talking about. Howard said multi-stage. The festival actually takes place in different venues across the neighborhood of Hyde Park. So every stage is a different setup. Every stage is different lighting, it's different access. And so Mark's problem-solving abilities come directly to the fore in this context.
Thank
And
you.
we should say also that those multi-stages are, some of them are blocks apart. They're
Yeah.
not like all
Yes,
gathered around one.
Well,
center.
I write
and he has very long legs.
well, I gave up my legs, so to speak, and gave up a car for a bicycle. I found that bicycling was the most efficient way to get between all the different venues. I've bicycled up to 20 miles. I mean, total, when I go back and forth and
Wow.
all these things. Some of the venues are 2 miles apart, from 47th to 63rd Street. I don't know if that's 2 miles, it's about 2 miles. And so you're doing back and forth, and yes, I have to walk into a venue and I have to start making decisions almost immediately. And about my camera and how to use it, what the lighting is going to be like. I've kind of internalized all that enough by now that I just, when with modern cameras, I can just look at the screen and say, this is okay. And I go for it. So that's a major thing that determines how I do my photography. And as I think I've said, and the clutter on the stage is real. And every photographer, I think, is somewhat frustrated by it. And I am as well. But you have to do something with what you got. So even this photograph, I don't know if you can see the keyboardist in the background, but I position myself so that the keyboardist is framed by the clutter. Okay, and rather than have, I make mistakes all the time, but the microphone line cord is not going right down through the middle of his face, right? I've positioned the keyboardist in there. It's you can see I had to get the people looking down from above. So this took a little bit of thinking and figuring it out. And now when I do this kind of work, I can almost and I think this was, I don't know if there are young photographers in the room, but it's, you really start to notice this stuff during editing. I think a lot more than you notice it while you're taking the picture. At least I do when I'm so moving so quickly. And you just have to learn. As my mentor, John White, taught me in very brutal ways at Columbia College, you'd turn in a picture which you'd spent hours printing, and he'd get out scissors, and he would cut it up and he'd go, here's the picture, here's the photo. And it was, I think the first time that happens to anybody, it happened to me. I was going, it's like, damn, I put so much effort into that. And it's just on the floor. And he even took one of my pictures once and he says, this is a nice one of those little pictures of a little headshot that's about this big in the newspaper. Oh my goodness. Okay. So this is something I've had to learn. Another aspect of doing not just the jazz festival photography, but the assignment photography is, and living in the community I live, is that remarkable things happen. And there's going to be 3 of these sets of remarkable things, or perhaps even more. But you all know who this is. And but you don't know that he's performing at our local high school for a private performance. And that he and other major artists do like master classes inside the high school. And as the local newspaper photographer, I've been given the opportunity to go photograph these things. So, you know, this was a while ago, I've forgotten. And here he is with the students signing stuff. And you get a very different feel for what jazz is for me. I mean, I think the culture of jazz is very different in each community in which it is taking place. It has many common elements, but they're very different. So New Orleans is very different from Chicago, which is very different from New York. I don't know those other cities as well as I do know Chicago. I know New Orleans a bit. And some of what becomes important for the jazz culture in those communities is not as important in other communities. I mean, the second line being something obvious for New Orleans. But in Chicago, music education is a huge thing. Music education in schools and in high schools. We even have a high school named after Dr. or Major, I've forgotten, Diet. I've forgotten.
Captain.
Yeah. Captain, who was a major influencer. He ran the marching bands. It was African-American high schools he worked in, and out of his crowd came lots of people. So this tradition in schools has been carried on, and the local high school in Hyde Park, Kenwood Academy, is one of the places where this tradition has been carried on in earnest. One of its instructors who just retired the year, Bethany Pickens, is a keyboardist pianist whose father was Willie Pickens. I don't know if you know of him. The other, I think that's Ferez with it. Yeah. And this is during, I guess this is a small image. Sometimes they get bigger. I don't know. No. Okay. And you know, so you use the usual toolkit of photographic techniques when you're out doing this work. When this is during, this is actually in a tent on the Midway Plaisance, which is a park in Hyde Park that cuts right through the middle of the University of Chicago, connecting 2 other very large parks, and was part of the exposition of 1893. The Columbian Exposition. And so it's an outside venue, and in September, if the weather is good, you can start to use the photographer's bag of tricks, like such as silhouettes, and you can get nice images by doing this kind of stuff. This is another one, and I was conscious about that tent in the background, and I said, that's a pyramid. I said, that looks like a pyramid, which is as you know, very much an iconic shape. and place that fits into the history of African Americans, and has had a role in influencing music and compositions in the past. So to me, it was this really cool that all of a sudden I could move Hyde Park to Egypt with this image. And so, you know, I'm not always good at this, and not everybody is, but a picture tells a story. It's not just the face and the action. I do know that a whole lot of jazz photography is very, very focused on emotion in the face, and in the face. And I watch photographers try to get that, and I don't have time to wait. So I have to do other things to evoke storytelling in my image. Sometimes this is just dumb luck, like this. That was there. It resonated with me. I moved on, took a picture. This is another thing that happens in local community things when things are just starting out. This is no longer part of the Hyde Park Jazz Festival, but it was an after festival public jam session. And it was delightful to photograph. If you see, I'm actually standing on stairs going up to the stage. Is that Maurice? And yeah, and Corey and Dee Alexander on stage,
Yeah.
just having a good time after the festival. So, you know, pictures from of other views of jazz, I think, are very important to jazz journalism. And this work I've done for the Hyde Park Jazz Festival has provided me opportunity to be in the place to take pictures like this. And once again, there's a little bit of clutter. I actually like it. I don't mind that trombone hanging over the heads of people. I think it works. It helps everything. I guess a subtext.
Do you ever clean up the clutter, like in a software like Photoshop or?
Everything inside the frame, everything that's inside the frame that I show you is color corrected, or maybe if possible, because as you know, working with stage lighting, you get weird colors, and or is sharpened. No, not sharpened. I don't do much sharpening, but there's contrast changes that I work. It's basically parallel to the same set of techniques that I learned doing darkroom black and white photography. I just said, okay, if this is what is accepted in the black and white world, right? Things that you can manipulate, then I'll do that. I do crop. I do crop to get rid of if there were like a bright light just outside the frame on me looking at the top left. I don't think there was one in this picture, but if there had been, I would probably cropped it out, because it would have moved the eye away from the image. It would have been too dominant a thing that the eye would be responding to. And I wouldn't want that, and I do it that way. So, but anything inside the frame that I see you, minimal amount of manipulation. You know, I mean, skin tones aren't great here. They're, you know, but they are what they are. The other thing that the Hyde Park Jazz Festival does, it does give me access. I got this thing in front of it, but I'm taking care of the audience. One of the things that I'm very well aware of is that my job is not to get my best picture when I'm doing this work. My job is to get what's needed for the festival, for it to do its work, and to stay out of the way of the audience. I'm actually a little irritated at quite a few jazz photographers, because they do not do things like go in front and get their picture and then go to the side. They hang out. They hang out in front of the stage, and I have to do some of that. It's not that you can't or shouldn't do that, but one of my jobs is to be an example for what you can do. So if you've ever watched me, I will set it aside and I'll decide what image I want, and I'll move in, take 4 or 5 frames and move away. And there's too much getting in the way of the audience experience. I'm representing the festival. The audience is my buddy. I don't want to, they understand, most understand. I run into a few people who are not that way. But I always tell my boss, hey, I ran into this today, just in case you need to know. So anyway, now this doesn't have focus right, and I didn't really care. Jimmy Ellis, it's Jimmy Ellis on the right, who was in the first picture I showed you, and he plays this kind of in many ways, there are sort of many godparents to Southside Jazz. There are those like Judith Stein and Jim Wagner who are on one side of it. Then there are those who are internal to the performers themselves. And Jimmy was one of those in that role. And this is his niece on the saxophone. And this was during a performance where she was playing in the Hyde Park Jazz Festival in a Hyde Park bank building. This also shows something that I like to do, which is this is probably taken with a 35 or maybe a 28. I like to be in real close, which is not something you can do in a lot of performance photography. Mainly because I just like the feel of what you get through the work. You're right there. You're feeling what's happening. It's cluttered. There we go. There he is. This is another use, of how you frame. From my point of view, I don't know if you like it. There's this framing is important. There, I think.
Can you please identify the player?
That's Maurice. What's Maurice's last name? Williams? No.
It's Maurice Brown.
Maurice Brown. Maurice Brown.
Okay.
And he's a Chicagoan.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so he was in probably one of your guys, Lauren, as up at the Jazz Institute for a while. I don't know. And
And he didn't come through the Jazz Institute's programs, but I did want to mention in that picture that you had previously of Maurice and Corey and Dee.
Yeah.
Corey and Maurice went to high school together.
Yeah.
And Dee, who is sort of the mother of jazz in Chicago, in the community, helped raise these guys up. And I am always really amazed and impressed at what you capture with knowing sort of just a little bit about the relationships amongst the community members.
Yeah.
You seem to manage to very frequently capture those relationships. Same with Jimmy and Diane.
Yeah.
Those are two really important people in the community. Diane was the essential jazz educator until she had a terrible stroke several years ago. So all of these sort of deeper internal relationships, whether you are aware of them or not, you get them every time.
Well, thanks. And I'm not aware of a lot because I'm just a simple assignment photographer.
I know.
And in response to your question, I may not know the names of all of these people I showed pictures of, so we're going to have to rely on others of you to help. Okay. I've only entered a contest for a photo once ever in my entire life. And it was this Jazz World photo thing, which is out of Europe. And I said, damn, they need to know about the Hyde Park Jazz Festival. And so part of it was, as a photographer, you go, well, is my stuff good enough? You go through all these kinds of responses to my work. And I thought this was pretty well. This was using the lighting in a storytelling way. This was the stage lighting, pointing straight at Corey Wilkes. And I said, I can use that. And so I was backstage behind a curtain, peeking through a slit in the curtain with my lens. And I saw that what was there, and I probably took 6 or 7 shots, and this is the one that worked. And I said, I'm going to submit this. And this was the first time Jazz World Photo had a contest. And I didn't win any of the top prizes, but this photo was among the 30 that were chosen to be printed and went on a Europe-wide tour so and that Jazz World Photo is out of Czechoslovakia. I think it's sort of organized, but I kind of like it. Gets me out of the US's eyes into other eyes of doing jazz photography. So that's what this is. As you can see, it's it's cool that able to get the stage lighting to line up that way. Okay, this is another photo there will be more than one photo like this. This is a young man and his mother, red hair, at one of the earlier jazz events. From the distance, I saw them at this last year, and he's now a young man. So the jazz festivals is a place where people grow up in jazz. So to reflect back on what about seeing jazz is, to me, it's not just about the musicians and the performance. It's about the culture and the community. And this guy, he ended up later in life taking trumpet lessons from Corey. And so you begin to develop this whole community-like thing. Of course, if you're in Chicago, you got to eat food. Festivals are about food. And so, this is the beginnings of whatever for a good Chicago sandwich. I had to throw that in there because as a festival photographer, this is part of what I do. There he is. There's the young boy, a little older, still dancing. I mean, this is probably 2 years later, something like that. So you can see that it's this community event. And jazz is more than just the music. It really is important to the community. And I believe this was sent out in one of your ads. This is using the lighting once again. How do you deal with those big lights? And well, you wait and hope and pray and that something will line up, and then you do that.
But that was Tom Harrell, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And Lauren, remind me who this pianist is. He's died recently.
Randy Weston.
Randy Weston.
Yeah. So one of the big venues for the Hyde Park Jazz Festival is the Rockefeller Chapel, which is a gift to the University of Chicago from John D. Rockefeller, and is a huge thing. And it's their culminating event on Saturday night is a performance in this space, and it's a remarkable space. And so this photo was an attempt to give you a sense of the space, the audience, and the performer all in one. I had to sneak around back, and I was photographing between wooden lattice work. I unfortunately am kind of a very pale-skinned, white-haired, bald-headed guy, which becomes important as a photographer because I'm easily seen. Even when I wear dark clothes, light reflects off of me like, I have albedo, as the climatologist would say. And I'm a little bit concerned about doing this kind of work because I become a distraction to the audience. So I probably only stayed there a minute to get this photo. Here's my favorite seeing jazz photo. And because jazz infuses itself into the audience, into the people, and like all music does, and it becomes an emotion. And I think the variety of ways people are experiencing what they're seeing, mostly joyful, but the woman in the middle is not just joyful, she's also really connected. And you know, and this is one of these things where you got to balance the stage lighting against the backlighting.
No.
And it's you know, and I don't mind the bright light coming from the audience over there. That's kind of cool. Yeah, and
If there's a flash, somebody's.
Yeah.
probably the flash. Yeah, you know, and back to Kenwood Academy High School. There he is, one of the Marsalis brothers, and see the young bass player on the left.
Mhm.
I'm forgetting his name right now. I got it written down someplace, but he performed a week ago in New York City at a local club, and this is like 8-10 years ago when he was at Kenwood Academy High School. He's a bass player. I'll get his name, and that's Bethany Pickens, Pickens's Willie Pickens's daughter, and she was one of the major instructors at Kenwood Academy. There they are again.
Branford.
In Brantford, yeah. And I put this guy in the background because he is doing work now, and that did come out of the high school. And this is journalism from my point of view. This is very important for the jazz community. Now here we are back with Jimmy in a Hyde Park Jazz Festival. Another Hyde Park Jazz Festival organizes not just the festival, but a whole other series of things. And the two major ones are something called Back Alley Jazz, which takes place mainly in the South Shore neighborhood.
And which Jimmy actually founded.
Yeah, yep. And and this is a celebration of it. He's the Grand Marshal. He's getting older. But this is probably, I don't know, 2020, something like that, before he died, but not long before he died. And this was a march through the neighborhood. You know, with a lot of other of the South Side. I don't know about other communities, but African dance companies are extremely important in Chicago. There are quite a few of them, and these are representatives. I don't know. It could be. I know at least one person's from Muntu Dance Theater. Two are. I did their photography for a long time as well. And so this is just marching through this middle class Black neighborhood, which is also a story that's not told. That Chicago is full of safe places to be, and many of them are well, the headlines about Chicago don't reveal that there are manicured neighborhoods with lawns and children's toys that stay out all night long, and kids roller skating and doing hopscotch, all of whom are African American, and which is a huge part of Chicago's story. It dominates. It's kind of irritates me that it doesn't dominate. Kate, in her productions, has allowed jazz to move into many directions. And this is a group called Black Girls Can Fly, and it's taking place during a back alley jazz event in the South Shore neighborhood. Now, this is getting pretty far afield from seeing as a jazz photographer, which usually means music, but it's really what's happening in Chicago. There's just a whole lot of exploration and poking around and placement of people for and groups for trying to figure things out. You can see there's somebody playing music in the background, so they're dancing to this music they're performing. Okay, this is a Kenwood student. I've forgotten his name, but he is John White's grandson. He is the grandson of the photographer who got me into this game at Columbia College. His grandfather's a Pulitzer winner and worked on, so I included that to show the kind of connectivity of Chicago and its neighborhoods, the music and everything that is very, very characteristic of the city and is really important for the community of jazz. Here's Jason Moran during one performance, and I pulled out this picture of Jason Moran not because he's famous or that, but because he also worked with Kenwood Academy students. This is the same student I had shown you with Branford Marsalis, and the other photo whose name I've forgotten. I even got it ready with it, but who played last week in New York City. And so these kids who are recognized by the community get these remarkable opportunities here. And that's what I'm trying to build for you, is this sense of a community, and there's a whole jazz life.
Mark, could I just reflect on that relationship between Jason and the Kenwood students?
Right.
That happened when the Jazz Festival featured the Kenwood Academy Jazz Band.
Yeah.
In a year that Jason was performing, and Bethany introduced Jason to the band at the festival, and he immediately decided that his next gig at the Symphony Center, he would include the students at Kenwood.
Huh.
It was a huge project. It was really successful. And now just on Friday, he worked with them again for his current project, which is a tribute to James Reese Europe. And so that is the way that the community in Chicago works. Bethany was able to introduce a major jazz player to some high school students, and that relationship has continued because Jason understands how important that is too. But that's the way that's the flow of the way things happen because of the way this community works.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know enough about it in other major cities or communities where jazz is important. I'm sure that, I mean, there are a couple other things that I'm going to talk about that are related to this. I won't get into the fact that Chicago is important in the blues worlds and is the home of gospel music, and all these things interact. These students that you see at Kenwood Academy High School, they probably, most of them, go to church and are involved in church music productions. They could even be up on stage behind the preacher doing the drums. It's a whole culture of opportunity for those who are interested in doing music. And it's oops. So thanks. Lauren can jump in as often as. Okay, back to the Jazz Festival. Kate Dumbleton provides opportunity for very different things to happen. This is Angel Bat Dawid's Requiem for Jazz production, which was, I believe, the Jazz Festival paid for that. And it's just, epic scale kind of stuff. I don't know if you know Angel Bat Dawid, but she is epic and in her productions. And so she is conducting here. And it's a full range of things that are within half a mile of each other. All these things are 2 miles of each other that are happening in Chicago. This is part of her production, which included dance, involvement in the local dance communities. So the jazz community is highly connected to other communities of artists. After the last jazz festival, I don't have a picture of it. They had a cook on stage, preparing a meal when jazz was being done. Dance and movement is really important. This is at Experimental Station. I don't know which year this was. This is people being invited to dance during the Hyde Park Jazz Festival. Now this is a different story. As in all, let me put it this way. Everybody's aware of DJing right now, and you probably associate it with dance music for younger people or something like that. And maybe with house music where it's really taken off and in full form. Well, during the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of people on the South Side who loved jazz, and they couldn't always afford to go to clubs or to performances, but they wanted to listen to jazz. So they started DJing these little performances, one of them which was in a back alley, and this was not started by I'm forgetting his name right now.
Yellis.
Jimmy
Yeah,
Ellis.
yeah, it was started by a bunch of DJs, and they had a performance in an open garage, and it was only men who were DJing, and there was a bar around the corner called the Spanish Club, and which also had jazz. But people would come over, and every Sunday for years, they would DJ and dance to music. This was a group of Black people on the South Side who didn't have all that much access to downtown jazz joints, where they weren't always welcome, and or for other things like that. And so they would dance Saturday away. Later, Jimmy Ellis and others actually started to join them. So this is an older thing. The main purpose, if I'd interviewed all these guys, and I'm writing a story about it, but they have a narrative that's contradictory to the current known narrative about it. I mean, so it's interesting. So this is, in addition to the men who were doing it, there were women who wanted to be DJs. And so they started DJing a lot of record stores, and they would have a cousin who had a bar, so they DJ there. And this is Emma Manchin. Emma Manchin in this picture is probably 95 years old. She still lives. And once a month now, on a club on the near South Side, Baseline, they get together at 3 in the afternoon for 5 hours of DJing and listening to it. I'm convinced that, I mean, I don't know, when I was a kid, there were always mainly guys, I just knew them as guys who were kind of tech nerds back in the day, and they would high-fives, and they would talk about their woofers and all their systems and stuff like that. Well, in the
It sort of reminds me of the session we had prior to this with an Irish photographer who documented the Tokyo jazz joints.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So here she is, looking at her playlist. This is her hand on the console.
That's beautiful.
Right. And so this group has been part of Back Alley Jazz twice, and they were this past year as well. So this is a group of them having a fun. That Emma is in the background at the console, and this is the Yvette, this woman who's laughing right there. She worked in a food truck outside of the Back Alley Jazz joint on the South Side with her mom, and they sold pig ear sandwiches. I mean, these stories, and what has meaning, there she is dancing. She's elegant. She's 80 some odd years old in this picture, and she's dancing at the baseline. Here are just some other Hyde Park Jazz Festival photos I've taken where the performer isn't the one doing the actual playing at the moment, isn't the most powerful thing to photograph.
So that's Charles McPherson.
Right. And I forget the name of the pianist. This is in the audience. This is dancing. This is noticing the flare in the light and saying, I'm going to go for it. I always work at the edge of my capabilities on the camera. I like darker pictures because they are more dramatic. They bring out some of the black and white emotion that a bright color picture sometimes doesn't contain. And
what's interesting, I found that interesting in a intriguing way is that you never desaturated these images to make it black and white. even though it has this color noir quality to them.
Yeah, well, I have tried that, and every time I try to move my color images that I take digitally to black and white, I want to get out my old black and white film camera and start doing it right. And that's just too expensive and too time consuming for work.
Mhm.
You cannot do that kind of photography for work. You'll run yourself into the ground monetarily. So if I can make something that has a good feel to it, I'll keep it. But it is. I've discovered that a lot of photographers are afraid of the dark, and so they try to get more exposure. And I really think that it's hard. I mean, I don't. This is
Mhm.
probably taken at a hundredth of a second, so it's not a great shutter speed for capturing uh, movement. But if you compose something if you're lucky, I'm can't overestimate the role of luck uh, in this kind of thing. Then you get an image that tells a story, and that's what
Well, as they say, Kant uh, prefers the prepared mind, right? You have to also have the right,
yeah,
be
yes,
ready to take the or to take the be ready mentally to take opportunity of the luck,
right,
of the
yeah,
lucky moment.
and I
Right,
would,
and I just wanted to reflect too that Mark's ability to capture things in the moment, whether they are performers on stage or the people who are watching, it's all, I think, sort of grounded in your ability to improvise, be in the moment, recognize it, and respond, which is the same thing the jazz musicians are doing on stage.
well, there is. I mean, you do that. I think Lauren's photography. I'm just going to say this has broken through something that needed to be broken through, which was static imagery, and yeah, just a second.
I think as jazz photographers, we're all doing that, like trying to be in the moment
You see that?
and respond to it. But Mark doesn't just do it on stage, he does it just as well and effectively off stage.
This is in the little thumbnail of me.
Hmm.
So there you go, Howard. You see that book?
I do indeed.
Yeah, and there's a reason that her photograph, I don't know what the reason was, but I know there's a reason, was chosen for the front. And it wasn't, and from my point of view, it wasn't because it was a standard jazz photo. It was taking photography and moving in a new direction with it. So
Thank you.
yeah. I wanted to say one more thing about being close. I think I have this partly in my personality, but I also have cultured it, which is that to get this close in a picture, the people you're photographing have to trust you. I mean, I'm inches away from these people, right? In this photograph. Now, there's a trick. Maybe that's the wrong word. It's not. It's an anti-trick. The way of presenting yourself to the audience in such a way that they start to trust you. They know who you are. I wear my staff uh, label
Badge.
out in front of me. I never take pictures of children without asking the parents' permission, ever. And when I do ask that, I do it in front of everybody else. And so what I'm doing is taking care of the child, but I'm also trying to let other people know, hey, you know, I'm building a relationship here. I'm not going to get you. And that's actually my role in my news photography is I'm really not a gotcha photographer. I hate gotcha photography. I want it to be real, not something you trick somebody into. So
Mhm.
yeah. And so I take a lot of pictures. People will watch me taking pictures and they will get kind of irritated or curious, but after a while they forget about me when I take a lot of pictures, and I have to go through that first stage of taking too many pictures and establishing what my role is, and then all of a sudden I can do the other things and move in and get pictures, and people aren't looking at me. They've lost their awareness of me in a way, and sometimes when they do get awareness back, they smile at me. They understand what I'm doing. So it's I mean, each of us photographers has a different kind of approach to what we're doing. Uh, uh, Lauren's got her new approach, which is, I think Michael Jackson has a very specific kind of photography that he does. I actually, on the Hyde Park Jazz Festival's Flickr page, which I maintain, which is so archaic and Stone Age, I don't understand it, but be that it is, I actually made a picture of Michael Jackson in Michael Jackson's style to see. And Mark Kempner is very much of a classic documentary photographer in many ways. So there's a lot to look at in his pictures. They aren't so. Mine have a bit of an advertising quality to them. They're supposed to hit you, and because that's their job for the festival, is to go, oh, look at that. Not to say that none of all those photographers do that as well. It's just where their emphasis is and how they do their work. So jazz photographers do a lot of things. And this was at a recent festival. Love it when you get somebody who, in this case, she's got darker skin than the people in the background. And the first one I showed you, she had lighter skin than the people in the background. And that all helps the photograph work well because it focuses on the individual and then moves out to the crowd. I love that kind of use of imagery. I mean, she's standing out anyway. I mean, she's gorgeous. She's got great hair and great pictures and great glasses and great smile. So you gotta have something for the eye to work with when you take a photograph. And the foreground and the background are where people use it. But anyway, this was last summer. Here's one of those. This is in the South Shore neighborhood, and this is one of those back alley jazz guys with his equipment just in the neighborhood. So I don't know. And this is one of them, that Brandy Younger that I think you used in one of your advertisements. I think you also got a Pharaoh Saunders picture. Did I send that to you? I don't remember sending that to you. And I took a picture of Pharaoh at the Promontory, which is a local jazz club.
I think you did. I think you
Okay.
did send the photo, yeah.
And this is sort of I'm going to call this a normal picture. I mean, which it isn't, but it's using techniques that people try to do when they see through something. This is kind of difficult with modern, because this is hand focused. This is manually focused because the automatic focuses will immediately try to focus on the strings. So you have to hand focus, which is interesting because it's moving, and so the focus is moving. But I hadn't really done one of these before, but I really worked at it because I said, oh, here's the opportunity, and I think it worked. Oh, there it is. We're back to that runaround venue, 10, 12 miles. By the way, just to be sure about this, in that in that chart, the places were chosen because I was needing to cover venues. That was a specific interest to Kate this year, that I had to get venue shots, the different venues. And that has to do something with the relationships she's having with the university. I don't know if you know, but Hyde Park Jazz Festival lost some of its funding from the university, and I'm sure something was in the background of her mind about venue use. And so it's not a ranking system of good or bad as part of performances. It's really the shot list is really aimed at what is necessary for the jazz festival to work, and that's not just great music, which there's plenty of at the Hyde Park Jazz Festival. Have I done my little advertising okay?
Yes.
So that I'm open to anything I can access, maybe other images as well. So there you go.
The thing that strikes me about this, I really appreciate your photography of the audiences in reaction, but it seems like these photos would benefit by being seen together, and I'm not sure that they're getting that opportunity by being used by the festival for grant applications. I mean, you're not publishing, these could work really well as a photo essay. They could work really well as an exhibit, a standing exhibit, because, we do want to see the musicians and the music as well as the audiences that are responding to them.
Right.
And it seems like that kind of um, interaction of the images is not really available in the use that's being made for them right now.
Mhm.
So would you have or have you had an exhibit in the cafe at the Logan Center of all these photos together?
Mhm.
Or is there someplace else where a collection of these prints could be hung for a period of time?
Well, I'm sure that's a good thing to do, and I've thought about it. I'll be honest with you, I still need to earn money. It takes a lot of money to put on a show, and to do the printing, to do the matting or framing, and all of that kind of stuff. I haven't been a person scurrying after grants, so that's really not part of my toolbox or skill set. I do assignment work and I move on. And
I think the Howard's question perhaps is more, have the festival used them as a
no.
Well,
grouping?
they do a digital slideshow after the fest featuring Mark's work, and in that context, they're exactly what you're saying. They are performance photos and audience photos, and that sort of after fest um, recap is very well done and very effective. And so maybe finding places to do that, to present that in a digital way beyond whatever Hyde Park Jazz Fest is doing with it, or even having Hyde Park Jazz Festival create a page on their website to feature your photos would be, I bet they would be open to doing that.
I mean, that would just extend the reach of what they're paying him to do already, of
Yeah.
course. And would,
I mean, Kate and I are talking about that, particularly in regards to the 20th anniversary.
Mhm.
And so I don't want to get ahead of myself. We haven't had our first meeting. We've had our first conversations, but not our meeting about that. So I don't want to jump ahead towards, because she gets to be the one to sort of help me figure that out. But there's a lot that could be done. There's a community of jazz photographers who deserve to be part of any retrospective on the festival. That brings up its own issues. There's other art that is being done. There's just, there's a large number of things. Yeah. I suppose that if I weren't busy writing stories about the development of Hyde Park for the Hyde Park Herald, which is what I'm doing this weekend, and that I would spend it doing elsewhere. But that's the nature of my life right now, is being very busy, very doing stuff. And
I just think it's what your photos represent is the call and response relationship between the music and the audience. And it's actually that audience response is what fuels the musicians. It's a I don't know what the word is, but it's
Feedback loop.
yes, it's a feedback loop.
Yep.
Without which the music probably, I don't want to say the music wouldn't exist, but it wouldn't exist in the way that it does. And very few people, although probably most of us photograph the audience. I always photograph the audience too, but I think your work is so strongly represents that joy and concentration and reception to the music that it's just important that people see that and understand it for all of the reasons that you have expressed in the course of showing us your work.
mhm. Yeah.
May
I've-
I love the sense of the community that you convey,
Thank you.
and it's very strong. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's easy when you have that to look at, it walks into the camera for you. I mean, really, that's one of the things I've become quite surprised about, and I think it's probably not being a Black person that it causes me to be surprised. But there's so much amazing stuff that isn't looked at. I mean, not just in jazz and music, but just everywhere on the South Side. And I go, why isn't this seen more? And it's available. I mean, and once again, I think you got to develop trust with communities to get the pictures. And
That is absolutely true. You do have to develop the trust to get the pictures, but to your point about how this stuff just happens and you walk into it, I've photographed next to you at many times at the same festival into the same crowds, and I cannot get what you get. You
But
have an
Mark,
eye.
you aren't tall enough, Lauren.
That's right.
Well, that might be part of it.
I mean, my height as provides me with a real advantage. I mean, I've noticed that, and maybe people have noticed me when I sometimes photograph a stage is like 4 feet off the ground or 3 feet. I'm 6'6.5" tall, basically. So when I raise my hand over my head holding my camera, I'm almost on eye line with the performers.
True.
Yeah, and there are very few photographers that can get that perspective. I didn't really get into it. I mean, I really love dealing with crap, excuse me, that's on the stage. Like, who's the drummer that did the solo bit on the Midway this past year? I've forgotten his name. He's apparently extremely well-known drummer. I mean, he backs tons and tons of group. He did a full solo show, and I had to shoot through the cymbals and drum kit to get him, and I was having a blast trying to frame him, in within that. And there's where you need patience too. I mean, you need the same kind of patience for that work as you need to get the emotional reaction of the face. Because how is this going to work?
Was it Nate Smith?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I love compositional challenges. I think is one of the things that I've developed, as well as the emotive reaction. And
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
This was really wonderful session. We will have the video edited and it will be available on the Jazz Journalists Association YouTube channel.
Okay.
And thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you next month.
Great.
Mhm.